Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Chef Chris Galarza. I'm the founder and culinary sustainability consultant of Forward Dining Solutions, the nation's leading expert in commercial kitchen electrification. I'm happy to be here today to discuss the future of dining, more specifically, the electrification of kitchens and what that actually means for your builds. Now, I am the expert for commercial kitchen, but I know a lot of you work on residential appliances or residential kitchens. That being said, a lot of these lessons can be utilized in the residential space. So who are we? We are Forward Dining Solutions. We are here to help designers sustainably build kitchens of the future. We are the first, and as far as I can tell, the only firm focusing on commercial kitchen electrification. We're the only firm with real world working knowledge of electric kitchen technologies because we are a chef-owned company, minority-owned company that's actually worked in these spaces. I myself have had the pleasure of running an all-electric kitchen for the last 6 years before I started consulting full-time. We are chef experience in all facets of dining, from 5-star, 5-diamond resorts to small-scale restaurants and everything in between. And we are also experienced with working with multidisciplinary teams to achieve a sustainability goal. Now, in the discussion of building electrification, we need to figure out where it all began and how quickly it's been ramping up to see if it's anything viable. Well, truth be told, the conversation around building electrification really only, at least for the majority of Americans, took hold in August of 2019 when the city of Berkeley banned gas for new buildings. I'm going to stress there, new buildings, but that was only a couple years ago. Fast forward to September of 2019, President Biden mobilized OSHA to begin working on safety standards that would take care of workers indoors. So it would curtail the indoor working indexes working heat indexes of the spaces, which would make warehouses and commercial kitchens part of that. Right now, they're proposing 82 degrees Fahrenheit. It's about to go live in California, and the federal government is working on that for nationwide. And if you know anything about commercial kitchens, you know that there's no way of making a combustion kitchen that cold, no matter how much AC you pump into that space. You cannot exhaust out radiant heat. So the best way to move forward into a cooler environment will be through electrification. More importantly, Energy Star will no longer be recommending gas appliances for its next most efficient list. So we all know that LEED, a prerequisite of LEED is to get Energy Star certification. And if you are going to put gas appliances in your spaces, it's going to be that much harder to get LEED Platinum. So it's something to be aware of as well. November of 2019, Ithaca, New York became the first city to 100% decarbonize their buildings. I'm talking new and old construction. So it's not going to matter who you are, what building you are in. There will be a push, a mandate rather, to electrify your building by 2030. Followed by New York City. December, they went ahead and banned natural gas in new buildings as well, which made it the largest city in the United States to make this decision. Then we kicked off 2022 with the state of New York backing of the nation's first statewide gas ban. So a lot of stuff has happened in the last couple of years, and it's incredibly fast. We are not really used to the governments working that quickly, and the fact that it's gone coast to coast with incredible speed just shows the popularity of this movement, and that it's not really going away. This is a map that my good friends at the EPA was willing to share with me from November of 2019. You can see how many cities and states are working on reducing their emissions by 80% by 2050. Look at California specifically. You see there's only 4 cities that were making this pledge. Now there are 54 cities and jurisdictions that have banned gas effectively, and Los Angeles is expected to be another one of them. In fact, the state is working towards possibly banning it for the whole state as well. So again, incredible speed. In just 2 years, 50 additional cities have signed on to reduce their carbon emissions. So let's recontextualize the argument. Let's understand what we're really talking about here. When we talk about getting rid of gas, when we talk about electrifying buildings, we're really only talking about a few things in the kitchen. But imagine a world where we didn't electrify everything. What would that look like? And this may be a little silly to some of you, but I think it's really important to understand that everything around us is already electrified. So let's just go ahead and watch this. So yeah, everything around us is already electrified. There's really in your residential spaces, just a few appliances in the whole building that work off natural gas. In the commercial space, there's only a few pieces of equipment that works on off natural gas, but it doesn't have to be that way. So what is the point of even talking about building electrification? What's the point of talking about getting rid of gas? What's the point of talking about electrifying kitchens? Well, when we burn natural gas, some of the byproducts that we release are formaldehyde, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, particulates like soot and smoke, and things that just build up on the pan. And it's just not good for us as well. But more importantly, it also releases a substantial amount of carbon monoxide. Now, how much you may be thinking, it's actually pretty shocking. So carbon monoxide is an odorless, colorless toxin where typical outdoor concentrations are anywhere from 0.03 to 2.5 parts per million. Now, federal standards dictate that anything beyond 9 parts per million needs to be handled quickly. It's unacceptable. They come in, they shut everything down until they find the source of the contamination, and then they take care of it. Now, when you cook with natural gas, your space can far exceed 200 parts per million. That sounds insane. Why are there standards that are 9 parts per million outdoor, but indoor can exceed? In fact, as far as I know, there's not, if any, indoor regulations on carbon monoxide concentrations, which is pretty awful. But the symptoms of which are nausea, vomiting, headache, lightheadedness, complications of which are permanent brain damage, cardiac damage, and even death. Now, what about propane? A lot of folks are looking at propane as the fuel of the future. In a word, no, it's not. It's not the fuel of the future. In fact, it increases carbon CO2 emissions by 18.8% and NOx emissions by over 200%, 230% to be exact. So it's not much better. In fact, propane is actually a really good refrigerant and should be looked at, but not for cooking. So thermal comfort in the commercial kitchen. This also will apply to your kitchens at home. How many times have you gone to cook and your kitchen has just become too hot immediately? That's, again, you can't exhaust out radiant heat. And a lot of folks in their homes don't even turn on their ventilation because they just can't stand that sound. It's too loud. It's too annoying. So what is thermal comfort? There was a study done, and they had to essentially identify what it is in order to quantify it. So they identified thermal comfort under 3 pillars. The first are the things that nobody can control, right? The outside air velocity, the humidity, things like that. Then what the operative or the operator can control, like air temperature in the building, radiant temperature of the equipment that you're buying. And then the occupant behavior. What are you as an individual wearing? What's your activity level? Things of that nature. All that combined, is what thermal comfort is. So they did a study where they tested over 100 kitchens in the United States between different climate zones, and then they compared those exact same kitchens to summer and winter. They found that 68 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit is that threshold, which is why OSHA is looking at curtailing emissions to indoor working temperature to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. The study has a lot to do with that. But they found that the only time a kitchen was comfortable is if they were prepping or cleaning. Pretty much it. You can see these dots out here, way out here, high humidity, high heat. I can tell you personally from experience as a chef that it's not uncommon for folks to pass out or just get sick. I can tell you that there's been many a times I've been working on the line that I would look down and see my thermometer on my chef coat read 135 degrees Fahrenheit. And what that does to your body is no matter how much water you're drinking, it's just coming out of you. And after each rush, a lot of us would be clamoring to go to the bathroom so we could throw up. Those are the conditions that we work in and day out. We don't get much reprieve. In fact, this isn't a new phenomenon. If you ever read Kitchen Nightmares, Chef Bourdain talks about this in his book, talks about the chef de cuisine passing out, fires erupting, things like that. It's not a fun environment. Here's another breakdown. You can see that the kitchen far exceeds the top of their scale. They were kind of shocked when they found this this phenomenon to be true, and they had the studies to back it up, that even in the winter it's still getting warm, it's still getting hot. You see, it doesn't really stop. It's a relenting ongoing thing that we have to deal with as chefs, but there's a better way of doing that. This is data from my own kitchen, my electric kitchen. This was taken, you guys can look it up, in Gibsonia, Pennsylvania, from September 9th to September 16th of 2019. That week was perfect. And I mean, it was between 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, no clouds, perfect summer week. It was beautiful. But the truth is, in my kitchen, next to my ovens or during production, when things are the hottest, my kitchen never hit 74 degrees Fahrenheit. It was far cooler in my kitchen working than it was outside in a quote unquote perfect summer week. That's the stark differences between gas and electric kitchens. What are electric kitchens? What do they look like? What do they consist of? Primarily, induction cooking is one of the things that we use to increase performance and decrease the temperature. So what is induction? Well, first and foremost, I can tell you it's not gas. It's not, these coils or coils 2.0, as I call them. That radiant heat, what you have to do with those is you send in electrical currents that then have to be converted to heat energy, and then it goes into the pan, which is a far slower process, more efficient than gas, but it's far slower. We need in the kitchen to cook quickly. We need to be able to put food out. Your ticket times can be 10 to 15 minutes, and we can't wait 10 to 15 minutes just for the pan to get hot. As you can see here, induction is a much safer way of cooking. The only thing getting hot is the pot, not the ice. Nothing else is getting hot, but the vessel in which the food will be in. It's a way of cooking using electromagnetic currents to heat your cooking vessel. And it's an easy way of meeting your sustainability goals, as well as saving yourself money. To be clear, there are no thermal sources on this piece of equipment. That's going to come into play later. How does it work? How does this technology work? Well, imagine your microwave at home. You turn on your microwave. It sends the aptly named microwaves into your food, and it really gets those water molecules excited. They're bouncing off each other. They're creating molecular friction, and they're cooking your food from the inside out. We are doing something very similar. What we're doing is we're taking a tightly wound copper coil, sending electrical currents through it, and as it's rotating around there, it's creating what's called an eddy current. And that eddy current creates an electromagnetic field that excites the ferromagnetic molecules in the pan and creates that molecular friction we were just talking about. As it's jumping around, the pan is taking in that energy because of the linear structure. Because of the linear structure of the pan, it's able to accept heat and electricity really well. So we work with the structure of the pan in order to heat the pan itself. The data behind that is that we're able to heat up vessels so much faster, and we'll go into that a little later in the presentation. So what are the pros and cons of this equipment? It can't be all pros. Well, we're going to focus first on cons. The initial cost. How much is this going to cost me? In the residential space, the costs are relatively even. In the commercial space, you see a little bit more of a disparity. If you were to buy a 6-burner induction range from South Bend with a built-in oven and all, which is a good middle of the road range, you would probably pay about $36,000 to $38,000. With the supply chain, those things are changing, but those are the figures I have at the moment. With a gas range, same exact company, 6-burner gas range, built-in oven, the full 9, you're going to be paying about $32,000. So the difference is about $4,000 to $6,000, which when you're spending hundreds of thousands on your kitchen is really a drop in the bucket. But there are also tax rebates and incentives, depending on where you live, that can offset that. But yeah, that is definitely a cost that will be incurred. Compatible cookware. Do you have to upgrade your pots and pans? If you're a restaurateur that loves to buy cheap aluminum pans, yes, you're gonna have to upgrade your cookware. If you love to use copper, you're probably gonna have to update your cookware unless it has a sandwich bottom. Cast iron, perfect. It works beautifully with induction. In fact, in your home, a lot of the pots and pans that you use are induction ready. And if you want to double check, grab a magnet, stick it to the bottom of the pan. If it sticks, you're good to go. Now, another cost that can be incurred is the electrical capacity. What's the retrofit hurdle? How much is it going to cost me to upgrade my panels? Do I have to upgrade my panels? How much electricity do I need to run? How many more new lines do I need to run? Things like that. That can be costly over time. But if you are in a new construction, the omission of those gas lines alone are enough to make your entire build have a near instant ROI. It's incredibly expensive to put in these lines. Now, what are the pros? Very high efficiency. We're talking 80 to 93%, with about a 35% efficiency for gas. Heats up really quickly, precise temperature adjustments, no idling equipment, with no combustion, which means no carbon monoxide, dramatic improvement of thermal comfort, as we just talked about. And there's an extension of the life of your pots and pans. There's no warping. There's no soot buildup, which means there's no hot and cold spots. This means there's less chance of you burning yourself with the pan just falling because it's just so warped. And those are things that we see in the restaurant world all the time. Pots and pans just will not sit straight. And sometimes we'll see saute pans just fall because it's just rounded on the bottom. It's just a violent way of heating your pan, and your metal fights you, which is why it warps. And it takes so long to heat up as well. No, so what sort of solutions are out there? What exists? Well, there's really everything you can think of. Electric induction ranges, induction griddle, combi ovens, fryers, broilers, steamers, tilt skillets. There is nothing in a kitchen that has a gas appliance that cannot be converted to electric. That includes your grill. But yeah, it's even your soup wells can be induction. In fact, they have soup wells out there that can sense where the heat is coming, or sorry, where the level of your soup is and where the heat is coming from can just adjust and say, if your soup well's full up to here, as you're using it, it's only going to heat up where it senses a soup, so that way it doesn't build up that film that we all hate to scrub. And there's so many more new things, like the iVario cooking suite with Rationale. Like they are using AI to cook, which means that as we're seeing a struggle with finding employees, you can now cook pasta and things like that, where it will just cook everything for you, drain the water, shock your pasta, and then let you know whenever it's ready without any human intervention. It's really incredible, and things that gas cannot do. But it's also refining tradition. Tandoori electric ovens, electric induction woks. Those are things that allow us to continue on with our tradition. I myself am Latino, and cooking with my grandmother's recipes, it's almost a way to kind of connect with your ancestry, connect with your ancestors. And for me, my grandmother was second generation out of the Amazon rainforest. So, it's even more important to preserve those traditions. So when we say that we're electrifying our kitchens, it's a way of allowing our traditions to continue. Electrifying our kitchens, it's a way of allowing our traditions to continue, because we're able to cook the same way we have, just while being good stewards to the planet. In fact, if you get yourself as a restaurant an electric induction wok, you can save about 1 million gallons of water per year just with that one switch. So the costs are the cost savings are there. So heavyweight bout, gas range versus electric range. Let's see who's going to win. So this is always funny to me because I like to give the gas appliance every chance it can to survive. So for this one, we're going to say it's a 50% uh, efficient range, which means I have never seen a range like that. I heard they exist, but it's not really what you see in the residential in the commercial world. But we're going to go with it. We're going to say it's a 50% efficient range. It's a unicorn, and it works just like it does in the lab, because truth be told, these numbers that we give are under lab conditions. When they go into the field, you see a far, like, the reduction in efficiency is reduced. So the efficiency of gas, we're going to say this is 50, but truly it's 35 degrees, sorry, 35% efficient. And you will see that like when you're actually in the field, it's somewhere in the 20s. But again, moving forward, with that, you can cook about 38.6 pounds of food per hour. It's going to need time. It's going to need elbow grease to clean. It can cause burns and fires. If you've never cleaned one of these, I'm happy to explain it. So what you do is you take those grates off, you soak them in water with degreaser. You take those burners off. You take a toothpick and you poke a hole to every single one of those. Right. Make sure there's no debris obstructing your gas flow. Then you put that to soak. Then you scrub that whole piece down, the whole unit down. Dry that off. Pull the drip tray out. You pour the water or the grease and all that stuff out. Pull the foil out. You scrub that whole piece down. Put the foil back on, put the drip tray back in, scrub those burners and scrub those grates, dry those off, reassemble the whole piece, and then you light the pilot lights, and then you're good to go. All that time probably takes about 20-30 minutes if you do it right, and you can burn yourself. You can cause fires. I've seen it. I've done it. It's pretty common, if I'm honest with you. And if you don't light those pilot lights, it can be a big danger to the morning crew, your cleaning crew, or in fact, burning down the restaurant as a whole. Now, induction, we're talking 90+% efficient. So you can cook 70.9 pounds of food per hour. That is nearly double that of gas. It's easy to clean, hot soapy water. Remember when I said that it has no thermal sources? That means that if you, say, spill cream or it just boils over, nothing's going to get burnt on, which means no circles that we've seen on the glass, no having to scrub using harmful chemicals or harsh abrasive materials. Just wipe it off. Hot soapy water comes right off. You move on. You're able to clean this entire unit in, I'd say, about 5 minutes if you're slow. So yeah, it's a much better way of cooking, in my opinion, and the data supports that as well. So let's compare your walks. So that 100,000 BTU walk is about 19% efficient. You can cook about 124 pounds of food per hour, and it takes up a big blueprint in your kitchen. Now, if you look over to your right, you'll see a 5 kilowatt induction wok hob, and that is about 91% efficient, can produce 117 pounds of food per hour. And like I said, it's a countertop unit. So you can produce the same amount of food nearly on your induction, and you can actually reduce the footprint of your kitchen, which is insane. If I'm honest with you, it's pretty wild to see. But you may be thinking, well, that's less food, but that's also a smaller like I said, it's smaller footprint, and there's less energy going to the food. That 100,000 BTU range is getting about 20,000 BTUs to the food. That 5 kilowatt BTU hob is getting about 15,000 kilo BTUs there. So, but there's 12,000, there's 16,000 that just blow your woks out of the water, and those are the full size ones that I just showed you. So it's like it can, again, nearly double the amount of production. So, assumptions. What if you're running your kitchen for 360 days a year, for 15 hours a day, at $1 per therm, which is $1 per 100,000 BTUs for your gas, which sounds like a lot, or 17 cents per kilowatt hour for your induction. Well, if you were to run your kitchen like that, your 6-burner gas range would cost you $1,123 per year to run. If you were to keep these same assumptions, but for electric, you'd run your 6-burner induction hob for $1,114 per year. This isn't to say, look, you can save $9 a year by going to induction. It's just to say that the myth of it's costing too much, it just doesn't exist. In fact, going into as we discuss myths, we have to include a myth busting section. This is my avatar for all chefs that really hate the fact that we're talking about getting rid of gas, and he's very, very angry with us. He's saying things like induction cooking speed is exaggerated. We just showed how that's not true. You can cook actually twice as much food. He talks about how sauteing is impossible on induction because once you remove that pan off the surface, it's no longer connected. How could it possibly retain or be able to continue cooking? To which I say, how do you think it happens with fire? The fire doesn't follow your pan. He then comes back and says chefs or home cooks can't properly preheat their pans, so they can't saute properly. That's true. You should not be preheating your pans with induction because the heat is instantaneous. You don't need to get your pans hot. I've done demos when I pulled saute pans out of the freezer, put a little bit of oil and some cold vegetables in there, put it on the surface, and within seconds we were at a full saute. It's far quicker than gas. And in fact, pro tip here, just a little peek behind the veil. Chefs will oftentimes have their saute pans on the burners on full blast, waiting for tickets to come in so that way their pans can already be hot. In fact, when they're really busy, they have one burner with just a stack of saute pans cranked on high, which is obviously incredibly inefficient, but also it just goes to highlight how much slower gas is. Cooking with gas gives you more control, they say. He says because you can see the flame, you know how much heat you're giving it, which is true. You do have that visual cue with gas that you don't have with induction. But what you have is precision with induction. I can say unequivocally that my dishes will be more consistent than his, not because I'm a better chef, but because if I write my recipe to say I need cook A, assuming that this is a gas kitchen, cook A, I need you to sear those short ribs evenly on all sides and braise them on medium low for 6 hours, right? What does that mean? What does browning evenly on each side mean? What does that look like? My brown might be different from your brown. What's medium low? My medium low might be different from your medium low because you have medium, you have low, and you have a big gap here in between. And in contrary to popular belief, you can actually over and under braise your food. So precision is not there. What is precise is saying, Chef B, I need you to sear those short ribs at 435 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 minutes on each side, and then braise them at a level 2 for 6 hours. Now, what you've done there is you've said what temperature you want them seared at, for how long you want them seared at, and what level of heat you want it to have for long-term cooking, which cannot be misconstrued, cannot be screwed up in any way. So consistency. You can go to my restaurant on Monday and you'll have the same exact quality of food that you would have on a Friday. So we do have all that to say is you have far more control with electric. Induction cooking technology does not accommodate wok cooking. Come on, dude. He clearly wasn't paying attention to the presentation. It does accommodate wok cooking. In fact, very, very well. Glass surfaces on induction equipment will crack and warp because it's not able to withstand a professional kitchen setting. Look how big this guy is. He's saying he's going to break that glass. That glass. It just can't stand up to him. So let's take a deeper dive on that one because that one's pretty interesting. So glass surfaces will shatter and warp. First and foremost, they won't. We don't use glass. We don't use tempered glass. We use tempered ceramic glass, which is far stronger and will not warp. Now, tempered glass can withstand temperatures of up to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. The difference between that and tempered ceramic glass is that tempered ceramic glass can withstand temperatures far beyond 1400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hotter than any pan or oven I've seen in a kitchen get. And you don't believe me? Take a look for the picture. That's a picture where at the time was 5 years old, barely has a scratch on it. In fact, you can see how clean my walls are. So clearly able to withstand a professional setting. The truth about induction is that it gives way more power and control to the chefs. It's a lot safer to use. It's easier to clean. It saves you money, energy, and on carbon emissions as well. Flat tops or the griddles, they're indistinguishable from the gas counterparts. So they have the same knob, same flat surface. The only difference is you can, as you see there, there's a temperature readout. You can consistently and accurately put your food at a particular temperature you want. So if you like your eggs at a certain temperature, you can have them, and they'll be consistent every single time. It gives that by itself gives you unparalleled control. It's extremely quick warm up, extremely quick on rebounding on heat. So if you're cooking a case of chicken and the unit gets cold, it's going to bounce back a lot faster. It's easier to clean. Hot soapy water is all it takes. No more grill bricks, no more harmful degreasers. It's going to save you money, energy, and of course carbon. Now you're going to see a trend. Stop me if you catch it. Electric doesn't always mean induction as well. This is a triple deck oven with 2 built-in proofers. It gives us a lot more control than with our gas counterparts because we can set the stone on the bottom. We can set the heating element on top. And in fact, we can also set what we called the heat shield. So if we're doing pizzas or pastries, we can get in there and manipulate those products without the oven cooling down. We're also able to inject steam. So if we're doing baguettes, for instance, nice crusty breads, we can inject steam for a set amount of time, and every single bread will be consistent, no matter who bakes it. And again, saves money, energy, and CO2. Now, induction warmers, this is not really for the, these equipment, a lot of them are not for the residential, but it does give you unparalleled control. That sleek design makes for a great guest-facing interaction. No steam tables means no steam burns. Easy to clean, hot soapy water. Saves energy, money, and CO2. Hood systems, this is the most amazing thing. So for you guys out there who are building commercial projects, I highly recommend you looking into demand control ventilation, because this thing is unbelievable. It's got remote monitoring and adjusting, so you can adjust from anywhere in the world, really. Heat recovery, it's going to save you tons of money, energy, and CO2 as well. How? Again, this is probably my favorite piece of equipment in the whole kitchen. These sensors right here are constantly scanning the cooktops. And what's happening is that when it senses that your space is getting warmer, right? So say you have a pan, or say your griddle is getting hot, it knows, hey, I need to turn myself on. So it ramps itself up just to a certain level until the internal ductwork reaches a certain temperature. Then it really ramps up all the way. So it turns on and off when it's needed. And it had the added benefit of working with our geothermal system, of which at the time we had 46. And what that meant was that as the geothermal fluid, the propylene glycol, came up from 500 feet down at 55 degrees Fahrenheit, the heat that was captured, that was going to be expelled out into the atmosphere, was actually captured, sequestered, and used to mix with that propylene glycol. So it would bring up the temperature of that propylene glycol to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, in which we then piped it through the building to warm. So it didn't matter if it was summer or winter, we were always warming the building, because if we didn't, 55 degrees Fahrenheit would be entirely too cold for a lot of folks. We're also able to track our efficiencies in real time. This particular day, we were running at 94% efficient. So we were only using 6% of the energy that we would normally be using. We were able to identify errors in real time, able to track the usage by each hood, so we can tell how many CFMs each hood was pushing, what was the internal ductwork of each hood, all that stuff. It gave us so much more control and understanding of our system and how to run our kitchen, and that influenced the menus, honestly, that I wrote, so that way we would keep the efficiency low. Now, what did that look like? So the gray bar you see here is if you had had a constant flow hood system. Someone would walk in at around 6 in the morning, turn it on, it'd be at 100% all day long until someone turned it off. If you had a system like mine, you would see that it would ramp up as you began to cook, right? And it would ramp back down as needed. The result is that our system, and this is why I say this for last, because people, when they talk about cost disparity, this is the biggest cost disparity. It has nothing to do with gas or electric. It has nothing to do with electric or all that stuff. What it does have to do is efficiency, right? Because this hood system of that traditional size, of that size of a traditional piece of equipment would be about $100,000. This particular one costs $300,000. Again, big cost disparity. Why that's important to bring up and why that's such an important distinction is because of how efficient it was. We were projected to pay it off in 14 months, which sounds impressive. Truth be told, we paid it off in 9 months, far faster than people expected. We ran the kitchen so efficient that we saved over $300,000 within 9 months just of one piece of equipment working more efficiently. That's where we talk about, like, yeah, here's the upfront cost, sure, but what are you getting on the back end? So you may be thinking, who else has made the switch? Great, you did this, but is this right for my establishment, or is this right for my build? Can you produce quality food on this equipment? And I won't take offense to that question. So first and foremost, the Fat Duck. I'm sure some of you have heard of Heston Blumenthal out of the UK. He's all electric. Michelin star restaurant, one of the best restaurants in the world. Pineapple and Pearl, Michelin star restaurant in Washington, D.C., a little closer to home. New York, really close to where you guys are. Per se, a Thomas Keller restaurant, 3 Michelin star restaurant, all electric. Alinea in Chicago, we're starting to move west, all electric. 3 Michelin star restaurant. In fact, the only 3 Michelin star restaurant in Chicago. The French Laundry, one of the best restaurants probably ever made. It's really an incredible place. They are all electric, and they are another 3 Michelin star restaurant. How about Noma? Noma's the #1 restaurant in the world in Copenhagen. Ever heard of the Culinary Olympics or the Bocuse d'Or? Those are 2 of the most prestigious international culinary competitions. In fact, every international culinary competition in the world is all electric. So the idea that you can't produce quality, the idea that you can't cook, the idea that it's going to change how you cook is just nonsense, because cooking is about fundamentals. It's about technique. It doesn't matter if you're braising on induction or a campfire. The technique is the same. So once we realize that there's nothing really holding us back to the old ways, because not since the time of Escoffier in the early 1900s has kitchens even gotten a second look on maybe the design or the equipment can be changed. We've just accepted things for how they are. It's time that we understand that the status quo doesn't have to be the way it is, and we can make the kitchen new, and we can make the kitchen work for us. One of the things that really inspired me is that we are trying to stop, obviously, climate change, right? I heard a stat that blew my mind. It said that in order to halt, not reverse, just halt the movement of climate change to becoming worse, we need to reduce global emissions by 3.5%. In this country, in America, we are 15% of global emissions. So we can affect change in our spaces. Now, why are we even talking about kitchens? Is because kitchens are the #1 polluters of these buildings. The average office building has an EUI of 30. The average gas commercial kitchen has an EUI of 350. And that's a cafeteria style, one of the simplest forms. My kitchen, the all-electric cafeteria style kitchen, had an EUI of 51.9. So we can dramatically reduce emissions in this country by holistically looking at kitchens and making these simple switches that increases quality of life and increases our chances of making a better society with cleaner air, more efficient appliances, and maybe chefs might actually enjoy cooking again, and we probably won't see these shortages. Only one way to find out, that's to take that plunge. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm happy to take questions. If you look on the bottom, you'll see my email, cgalarza@forwarddiningsolutions.com. Feel free to check out the website, forwarddiningsolutions.com, where you can also reach out to me that way, check out our resources, learn about us, our brochure, the work we did with the William J. Worthington Foundation, where we wrote the Building Decarbonization Guide, which is the most comprehensive guide ever written on the subject of building decarbonization. And our chapter alone is 65 pages. So it's the most robust and well-documented piece of literature ever written on the subject. So once again, thank you guys very much, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. What an amazing presentation that Chris just gave us.
Thank you.
I am going to, I think Chris has addressed most everything from the chat so far, but please keep throwing your questions in there and I'll read them off for him.
Please do. I know that there was some questions about the hood systems. I can speak to the one at Chatham because that's the one I had the most experience with, and that worked with our geothermal systems. So the way the systems worked is that the geothermal was bringing propylene glycol from about 500 feet down up at a temperature of 55 degrees Fahrenheit. The hood system would sense the cooktop and start to suck up my grease-laden vapors. The filters, the filtration system would obviously clean out the oil and things like that that were in the steam coming out of it. And then instead of expelling that the hot air out, it would capture that heat in the propylene glycol within the system, send it down through the geothermal system in the basement, and then my warmed up propylene glycol would warm up to 55 degrees Fahrenheit up to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and then they would pump that through the floors, and that's how that would work. So we never had to worry about air conditioning systems or heating systems. It was just that system, and we warmed the building year-round, summer or winter, and that's where the savings came from. And also the fact that it would ramp up and down as it needed. So thank you, Craig, for the question. I hope that answers your question. I'm sure there's a lot more, but yeah.
Yeah. One of the ones we just got, Chris, is what is the best method of searing with electric?
Great question. So searing is a lot more complicated than most people think. It's called the Maillard reaction. It's just essentially the caramelization of protein. There's a lot that happens there, but we're not going to go into that. Essentially, what we need to sear is a hot piece of metal, right? So it's not so much as how can we sear with electric, because you can sear whether you're on a campfire, whether you're on a gas range or electric ranges. Can you get that piece of metal hot? If so, how fast? And then it'll sear. So the best method for searing is any piece of metal that is able to hold a magnet on the induction range. You're good to go. I love cooking on a flat top or tilt skillet if I'm doing large production volume. If I'm at home, something like a cast iron is perfect, and it works really, really well with induction as well. But yeah, I mean, that's essentially it. Just oil on hot metal, and then you sear it. And that's something that that's like one of the biggest myths that I hear out there in the industry is, can you still produce quality? Because as I was talking about in the chat, the propaganda machine of the gas industry, and I'm not here to bash on the gas industry, but the propaganda machine that they've been putting out with the hashtag cooking with gas and stuff like that is to convince folks that you cannot produce quality without this fuel, a fuel that is marketed and is very well an odorless and colorless and flavorless gas. So how could something with no flavor and no odor impart flavor? So the myth is that without the gas you can't produce the quality. And I've heard folks, I've gotten yelled at online about trying to take away walks from the immigrant community, not knowing that I myself am am a child of immigrants. I myself am a minority. But the fact is that before gas, there was coal, there was wood. So these cooking techniques have evolved over time already. It's not the first time. In fact, these are the exact same, I've heard a lot of the exact same arguments that was levied against folks who wanted to get rid of coal from the kitchen, right, to go to natural gas back in the early 1900s. So it's the same conversation taking place 100 years later, but yeah, the techniques are all the same.
So Karen asked a really interesting question, and I think this is interesting because I know we had a fast food client come to us recently to talk about net zero. She said, do you think this equipment would work in fast food restaurant chains since the price point is much less, but the volume is very high?
Yeah, in fact, in February, there was a new patent filed under CookTech for a clamshell griddle that's all induction. So the way that works is like it would be a flat top like a griddle, and then another griddle come on top, and it sears on both sides, creates pressure, cooks fast. So yeah, absolutely. In fact, you're seeing planchas replacing the gas grills at Chipotle. You're seeing electric broilers start to replace the gas broilers at Burger King. So yeah, this technology doesn't have just you can only use it at home or can only use it in certain applications. It is ubiquitous.
Interesting. I don't know if this question is, I don't know if there's somebody from the chat named Jay Hay, and they're asking about how do you use cooking methods like wok cooking on induction? Maybe they missed your section where you showed the wok.
Yeah, in fact, they are recessed units that is able to sit a wok inside. It mimics wok hay beautifully. You're able to get all the power you do need, and then instead of having the constant running water, you're saving about 1 million gallons of water a year. Those are conservative studies, but there is no piece of equipment in a traditional kitchen that cannot be converted to electric. That's just hard facts. There are, in fact, China has been adopting a lot of induction woks. I have a contact over there that is selling them left, right, and center. They're having a hard time keeping up with the demand, if I'm honest.
That's interesting. Then somebody followed up with that about the coal oven pizza ovens, like wood fired and coal fired pizza ovens.
Yeah, I mean, burning wood releases 16 times more emissions than cooking with gas. So I mean, and I can't think of any chef who can actually taste the flavor of the wood on pizza that's only been cooked in there for about 4 minutes. That's why, in order to taste the flavor of wood when you smoke, it usually takes hours to develop and take in those flavors. So really, you're not getting anything out of the wood. In fact, you would stand to reason to get a lot more consistency and a lot more power coming from an electric unit, or coming. I mean, honestly, using a gas unit would be more consistent than using coal or wood.
Yeah. Good question here from Deborah. She said she's been looking at induction stoves on the internet and she sees a huge range of prices. What should a homeowner look for in an induction stove?
That's a great question, because and I'm not the residential expert. I would highly recommend you guys reach out to Rochelle Boucher. She can walk you through all of this. But it's just like, think of it like a car, right? The basic mechanics of a car are all the same. Doesn't matter if it's a Corvette or a Prius or a Ferrari, right? The core mechanic is all the same. So how can they justify the price points? It's all about, you're going to pay for a name, and that name often comes with quality. So you pay with what you get. Are they using cheap equipment or cheap parts or not? So I would recommend doing some research into the brand. Like, I know Miele has a premium price, but they are a quality brand. Bosch, another one, quality brand. I've heard a lot of complaints about Frigidaire or GE, those cheaper brands. I would kind of talk to some folks who have it, or do some research on the review side. But yeah, I mean, it's just, certain brands are going to cost a premium because they're using premium parts. But yeah, so the quickest thing for a homeowner to do to learn more about which range to pick up is try to seek out an expert. And Rochelle Boucher, there's no better expert for the residential side than her.
Nice. And so Craig's kind of bringing you back to the conference topic. He's asking if you can talk about consulting business for a minute and how you support Passive House projects.
Right. Craig, thanks. Actually, Craig and I are working on a project here in Pittsburgh, and he's the one that kind of made this whole thing happen. So I owe a huge debt of gratitude to this man. So my consulting business, we are we've honestly never been consultants before, which is kind of interesting how we got roped into this. Consulting kind of came up, I always thought was like something you do as a retirement. And then I realized that there's a lot that isn't being discussed because there's never been a chef who's done this transition, right? At the time, I was like one of the first ones to do it. So as I started to learn more about this technology, and I started speaking with folks like Microsoft and Google and cities like Ithaca and states like Pennsylvania, and then the federal government like the EPA, I started realizing that this is something that's incredibly valuable. Not so much as like, oh, I should make some money off this, but more so of how can I help this industry that's given back to me so much. So what I've done is figured out what are the things that I wish I could have. What are the things that I wish I knew when I was building my kitchen at Chatham, and how can I help folks not go through the same growing pains that I did? And that's how this consulting thing came about. So what I do is I bring a chef's perspective, not a consultant's perspective. I bring a chef's perspective to these kitchens, to these projects. I work with folks like Craig, who are experts in passive house, and we figure out the best solution to reduce the emissions of a kitchen, reduce the energy consumption of a kitchen, and try to create a space that is healthy, not just for the staff, but for the planet as a whole. As we know, buildings are one of the biggest polluters in these cities. So, and when you introduce a kitchen, the pollution is 5 to 10 times more. So it's really pivotal that we look holistically at a kitchen, and we work with experts like Craig to really support that work.
And you were
There's
mentioning
so much more into that, but yeah.
The staffing is easier to control because the equipment it's smarter, it's more controllable, that sort of thing as well. So you're bringing down your costs there as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. One of the things that we're using now, because staffing is so hard, is AI controlled cooking. So you're seeing a lot of things like rationale cooking ovens that you can put a thermometer, a probe thermometer, say, into a piece of salmon, and then you set the temperature you want. You can go do what you got to do, and if you forget the salmon, no worries. That equipment has already cooked it to the temperature that it needed to, and it's actually turned itself off. In fact, there are units that you can say do a giant prime rib, and that prime rib will cook to the optimal temperature, and then it will cool itself down, and also have all these logs for the health department. And then you can set it to a certain time. So say you're going to have prime rib for the Mother's Day brunch, then it can come up to temp, so it's ready for that service, all without human intervention, which is going to be key. And it's going to be one of the most important things going into this next phase, this next evolution of the hospitality industry. AI cooking is already in residential homes. When I was working with Rochelle last year in San Francisco, she showed me that you hit a button for, say, hard-boiled eggs. You put the hard-boiled eggs into your oven, and it perfectly steams your hard-boiled eggs. And it's absolutely insane. Yeah, and I'm going to put that in the chat as well. Rochelle Boucher Kitchens to Life is her company.
Chris, I was really interested in the health aspect of it for the owners. I know Lloyd put a bunch of links in there about kids' health and asthma and things like that. The studies that you've seen, what are the long-term impacts of being exposed to not just the carbon monoxide, but that heat, that level of heat every day?
I can tell you from my own experience, it's awful. I can tell you that working in a kitchen, and the best advice I ever got to help me kind of really think about my future was I was working for a chef I greatly admire, and we were talking. I was still in culinary school, and he was asking about what I wanted in my future, this and that. And he said, if you really, truly love this industry and you give this career path your all, you truly only have about 20 years before your body starts to break down. That was a bit shocking. And now here I am. I'm only, I'm in my, so I'm going on 33 years old, and I have, like, he nailed it. My body's breaking down. Working under that heat, that stress, constantly running, being on your feet nonstop. I can tell you that working under these conditions It's not been good for my health. I can tell you that, we talked about carbon monoxide, right? And those symptoms of nausea, lightheadedness, and then finding out later that, hey, after each of those rushes on those super hot days that we were running to the bathroom to throw up, was I being exposed to carbon monoxide? What is that doing to my long-term health? So those are all things that I've been grappling with, but it's not to say like don't get into this industry. It's just to say that there are things that we need to do to make this industry better. There's things that we can do to make our home better. We know that childhood rates of asthma, the chief cause among them are environmental causes, and we know that cooking with gas increases contamination in the home 600%. Right, or whatever that figure is, it's a huge amount. Like I said, it went from 0.03 parts per million outside to 200 parts per million inside. You do the math. So there's a lot that can be done, and if we were to clean up our kitchens by introducing this technology that increases our capacity for cooking, decreases our need to clean, increases our time that we can spend with our family, and providing a space that can make a healthier home for our children, we are going to see rates of childhood asthma precipitously drop, and that's a $50 billion a year healthcare cost for American families.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that can be done just by switching out a couple pieces of equipment. It's honestly a no-brainer.
So from your perspective, or any particular points we need to consider in our effort to convert school kitchens to electric? I'd like to tag on to that question. The previous presentation that I watched was on the University of Toronto Scarborough's conversion from their original plan to electric, and the engineer did note that yes, there was an additional cost to bring the service up to what they needed it to be, but I'm guessing that is offset by the need you can eliminate your gas line now, right? And you can eliminate that now. So is it a cost neutral? Is it a slightly more to go to the
Yeah, good. That's a great question. It depends. If you are doing a new construction, then the omission of those gas lines would mean a near instant ROI for your building. Just huge. The cost of putting in that infrastructure is incredibly costly. And why, if we're just going to have to remove it in the near future? I mean, we talked about how OSHA is developing these regulations to, it's financially infeasible to put in this infrastructure just to not be able to use it later on down the road. We should be future-proofing our buildings. So for the question of, what do you need to consider in your effort to convert, consider if this is a retrofit, how much is this going to cost to retrofit? If you're in New York, which I see a lot of SCA folks from New York, you're going to have a huge task on your hands. You do have Local Law 97, which is curtailing the indoor carbon emission. Sorry, for any combustion over 25 kilograms of CO2, if I believe, cooking with natural gas releases 117 kilograms of CO2. So you have a lot to think about. How are we going to eliminate gas? How are we going to make it cost effective? How are we going to get enough equipment? You got 1,500 schools, I think it is, in New York City alone. It's the biggest school district in the United States. There's a lot to work through. So best thing to do, call in someone like me who can look at these kitchens, try to help figure out what the best way to move forward is. I'm assuming in New York, there's a lot of schools that are built using a certain model. We can help you figure out the best ways to save, like we're doing with Craig here in Pennsylvania, where we're looking at a school holistically, figuring out how can we shrink the footprint, but while still being able to produce the same amount of food, reducing the energy loads, reducing the ventilation needs, and all this stuff. There's a lot that can be done, but it's just going to take someone like me and my team to come in and bring our experience as chefs as well as consultants to help you get there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, that was the last question we had, and we're about 1 minute from the hour. I don't see anything else come in. Thank you so much for taking the time to present to us today. This is a really big issue for Passive House projects. So we're really glad to hear from you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And if everybody, if you want to learn more about building decarbonization, please go to my website, forwarddiningsolutions.com. Under the resource tab, you can download the free guide written by the William J. Worthen Foundation. It's the biggest, the largest, most comprehensive guide ever written on the subject. And I highly recommend you reach out to Craig Stevens. He is a wizard with modeling, and he is, like, honestly the most knowledgeable person I've ever met on Passive House. So those are the two things I'll leave you with. Thank you so much for having me. This is incredible.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Have a good weekend.
All right. Take care, everybody. Be safe.